The number 47 bus rattled through Atlanta's evening traffic, packed with tired bodies heading home. Amara Washington gripped the overhead rail with both hands, her scrubs still damp with sweat from a 12-hour shift at Grady Memorial. Her natural hair, twisted into a protective style that morning, had begun to frizz at her temples. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest. When the bus lurched around a corner, she lost her balance. Her hand shot out, searching for stability, and found it. Warm skin, solid muscle, unexpected steadiness. She'd grabbed someone's hand. Amara's eyes snapped open. Her chocolate-brown fingers were wrapped around a man's hand, a hand that hadn't pulled away. She looked up, an apology already forming on her lips, and froze. The man was Korean, tall, devastating in a way that made her breath catch. His white dress shirt had 4 buttons undone, revealing a powerful chest and the unmistakable curve of a dragon tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar. His dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made the crowded bus fade away. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. His grip tightened slightly. "Don't be." Then everything went wrong. Jin Woo Kang hadn't taken public transportation in 8 years. His Mercedes was in the shop, his driver had the night off, and he'd made the impulsive decision to experience the city like a normal person. The number 47 bus had seemed harmless enough. He'd been wrong. Standing near the back door, Jin Woo had been reviewing text messages about a shipment delay when the bus jerked violently. A woman stumbled into his space, her hand finding his in a desperate grab for balance. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. Her palm was soft, her fingers trembling slightly from exhaustion. When she looked up at him with those warm brown eyes, genuine concern flooding her features, something shifted in his chest. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes. Her skin glowed deep and rich like expensive chocolate, her natural hair framing a face that radiated exhaustion and stubborn strength in equal measure. "I'm so sorry," she breathed, but she hadn't let go yet. Jin Woo's fingers closed around hers instinctively. "Don't be." The moment broke when a man 3 feet away spoke up, his voice carrying over the bus's rumble. "Hey, sweetheart, you can hold on to me if you need support, I don't mind." Jin Woo's attention shifted immediately. The speaker was white, mid-30s, wearing a stained jacket and leering at the woman with obvious intent. She'd gone rigid, her hand suddenly pulling back from Jin Woo's. "No, thank you," she said firmly, her voice professional but strained. "Come on, don't be like that." The man moved closer, swaying with the bus's motion. "Pretty thing like you shouldn't be standing anyway. You can sit on my lap." Anger flashed hot in Jin Woo's chest. He'd spent 12 years building an empire in Atlanta's underworld, commanding respect through fear and strategic ruthlessness. He'd broken men for far less than this casual disrespect, but something told him this situation required finesse, not force. "She's with me," Jin Woo stated, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who never needed to raise it. He moved smoothly, positioning himself between the woman and the harasser, his body language screaming danger to anyone with sense. The man blinked, taking in Jin Woo's presence properly for the first time. Jin Woo knew what he saw: 6 feet 2 inches of lean muscle, expensive clothes, and a neck tattoo that marked him as either dangerous or reckless. The dragon's tail, visible above his collar, was traditional Korean work, done by a master in Busan before he'd left for America at 20. "We don't want trouble," the man mumbled, backing up. "Then find another bus," Jin Woo replied, his tone suggesting it wasn't a recommendation. The bus pulled to a stop. The harasser scrambled for the exit, disappearing into the Atlanta evening. Jin Woo turned back to find the woman staring at him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Jin Woo studied her more carefully now. The deep circles under her eyes, the way she leaned heavily against the bus's wall, the hospital ID badge clipped to her scrub top. "You're a nurse." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. Amara Washington. I work at Grady Memorial." "Jin Woo Kang." "People call me Jin." He glanced at her badge, catching the tail end of her shift time. "How you just finished?" "Second shift." Amara's smile was tired but genuine. "I work at a clinic in the morning, then Grady in the afternoon. double shifts help with my student loans. Something about her straightforward honesty appealed to him. In his world, everyone wanted something, everyone lied, everyone played angles. This woman, exhausted and still kind, seemed refreshingly real. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Southwest Atlanta, off Campbellton Road." She shifted her weight and Jinwoo noticed her wincing slightly. Another 20 minutes. 20 minutes she'd spend standing in a crowded bus, swaying on feet that clearly hurt. The thought bothered him more than it should have. "My car will be ready in 10 minutes, Jinwoo said, making a decision that would change both their lives. "My driver can take you home, it's faster than the bus." Amara's eyes widened. "Oh no, I couldn't." "You could." Jinwoo pulled out his phone, already texting his second-in-command, Taemin. "You're exhausted, you work 2 jobs helping people. Let someone help you for once. I don't even know you. You know I just protected you from a creep on a bus. You know I'm not going to hurt you." He met her eyes steadily. "And you know you're too tired to say no." Amara bit her lip, clearly warring with herself. Jinwoo could see her practical side battling her pride, exhaustion tilting the scales. Finally she sighed. "Just a ride home," she said firmly. "Nothing else." "Just a ride," Jinwoo agreed, though something in his chest tightened with satisfaction. "Nothing else." They exited the bus at the next stop, stepping into the warm Atlanta evening. The spring air carried the scent of magnolias and car exhaust. Within minutes, a black Mercedes pulled to the curb, Taemin behind the wheel. Jinwoo opened the back door, gesturing for Amara to enter. She hesitated only a moment before sliding into the leather interior with a small sigh of relief. Jinwoo followed, maintaining a respectful distance. "Campbellton Road," he instructed Taemin in Korean, then added her address in English once Amara provided it. As the car glided through Atlanta traffic, Jinwoo studied her profile. She'd leaned back against the seat, her eyes closed. Tension slowly draining from her shoulders. She was stunning without trying. The curve of her jaw, the fullness of her lips, the way her scrubs somehow still looked dignified despite the long day. "Why did you help me?" Amara asked suddenly, her eyes still closed. "On the bus, you could have just ignored it." Jinwoo considered his answer carefully. The truth was complicated. He'd been raised with rigid concepts of protection and honor, had built an empire on controlling his territory, had spent years ensuring women under his protection never faced harassment. But there was something else, something about her specifically that had triggered his instincts. "Because you deserved better," he said simply. "And I was there." Amara opened her eyes, turning to look at him fully. In the car's dim interior, her gaze was searching, intelligent, trying to figure him out. Jinwoo let her look, keeping his expression neutral. "You're not just some nice guy, are you?" she asked quietly. "No," Jinwoo admitted. "I'm not. But you're not going to tell me what you really are." "Not tonight." Amara nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that answer. "Will I see you again?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Jinwoo knew the smart answer was no. He should drop her off, disappear back into his world of deals and territory and controlled violence. She was civilian, clean, good, everything his life wasn't. But when he opened his mouth, different words emerged. "Yes," he said. "So you will." 3 days passed before Amara saw Jinwoo again. She'd almost convinced herself the bus encounter was a strange fever dream brought on by exhaustion. Then she emerged from Grady Memorial after another brutal shift to find him leaning against a black Mercedes, looking like he'd walked out of a Korean drama. The white shirt was back, 4 buttons undone. The dragon tattoo clearly visible in the parking lot's fluorescent lights. His dark hair was styled back, his expression unreadable behind expensive sunglasses, despite the evening hour. "You're stalking me," Amara stated, walking toward him with her arms crossed. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt strangely safe. "I'm ensuring you get home safely," Jinwoo corrected, pushing off the car. "There's a difference." "Is there?" But Amara couldn't quite suppress her smile. "I've been taking the bus for 3 years. I'm fine." "You were being harassed 3 days ago. And you handled it." She tilted her head, studying him in the orange glow of the parking lot lights. "Why are you really here, Jin?" Jinwoo removed his sunglasses, and Amara found herself caught in the intensity of his dark eyes. "Because I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted with startling honesty. Because you work yourself to exhaustion saving lives, and someone should make sure you're safe while you do it. Because, he paused, his jaw tightening, because I want to. The raw sincerity in his voice made Amara's breath catch. She was used to men wanting things from her, dates, attention, physical gratification. She wasn't used to men wanting to protect her simply because they could. I don't need protecting, she said, but her voice had softened. Everyone needs protecting sometimes. Jinwoo stepped closer, and Amara caught his scent. Expensive cologne, clean cotton, something darker underneath. Let me drive you home, Amara, just until things settle down. What things? The city. His expression darkened slightly. There's a Russian crew making moves. Dmitry Petrov, someone I have history with. It's not safe right now. Trust me on that. The name meant nothing to Amara, but the tension in Jinwoo's jaw spoke volumes. History? He blames me for his brother's death. He's been trying to muscle into my territory for 2 years. Jinwoo's voice went cold. Dmitry doesn't play by rules. He hurts civilians to make points. I don't want you caught in that. Amara wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her independence and self-sufficiency. But the truth was she was exhausted. 2 jobs, student loans crushing her every month, an apartment in a neighborhood that got rougher every year. Her life was a constant grind of survival. Having someone offer help, even temporarily, felt like oxygen after drowning. 1 week, she negotiated. You drive me home for 1 week, and then we reassess. Jinwoo's lips curved into a small smile. 1 week. That evening set the pattern. Jinwoo appeared every night after her shift at Grady, sometimes after her morning shift at the clinic too. He never pushed for more than conversation during the drives, never made her uncomfortable, never demanded anything in return. They talked about Atlanta, about her work, about nothing and everything. He remained carefully vague about his own life, but Amara began piecing together clues, the way people's eyes widened when they saw him, the deference in his driver's posture, the expensive watch, the custom-tailored clothes, the phone calls he took in rapid Korean that sounded like orders being given. Jinwoo Kang was someone important, someone powerful, probably someone dangerous. She should have been scared, she wasn't. On the 5th night, everything changed. Jinwoo had just pulled up outside her apartment building, a worn complex in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't reached yet, when his phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. The easy warmth vanished, replaced by cold authority. He answered in Korean, his voice sharp. Amara didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Anger, concern, command. The conversation lasted 2 minutes. When he hung up, his jaw was tight. I need to handle something, he said. Taemin will make sure you get inside safely. What's wrong? Amara asked, touching his arm instinctively. Are you okay? Jinwoo looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, warmth, something deeper. I'm fine. Dimitri's crew hit one of my warehouses. There's a situation I need to manage. Jin, I'll be back tomorrow, he promised, covering her hand with his briefly. I promise. He was gone before she could respond, the Mercedes peeling away into Atlanta's night. Amara stood on the sidewalk staring after him, her hand still warm from his touch. She didn't see him the next day, or the day after that. By the 3rd day, Amara told herself she'd been foolish to rely on him, stupid to let herself get used to his presence. Of course he'd disappeared. Men like Jinwoo Kang didn't stick around for women like her, exhausted nurses with student debt and no glamour. She was leaving the clinic after her morning shift, heading for the bus stop, when a white van pulled alongside her. 3 men jumped out, moving with practiced precision. Amara's training kicked in immediately. She screamed, spinning to run, reaching for her phone. She wasn't fast enough. Hands grabbed her arms, a cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. Chemical smell, world tilting sideways, sounds fading to nothing. Her last conscious thought was a name. Jin. Amara woke in darkness, her head pounding. She was in a room, warehouse, judging by the echoing quality of sounds. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, her shoulders screaming in protest. Terror clawed at her throat. She's awake, a voice called out, Russian accent, thick. Boss wants to know if we should start without him. Boss. Start what? Amara's nurse training forced her to assess. No serious injuries, just bruises. She could breathe, could think. She needed to stay calm, needed to survive. Wait for Dmitri. Different voice, also Russian. He wants to see Kang's whore before we send the pictures. Heavy footsteps approached. A man came into view, white, mid-40s, with cold blue eyes and a scar running down his left cheek. He crouched before Amara, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. "So you're the one," and he said in heavily accented English. Jinwoo's new obsession. "You know, I wondered what kind of woman could catch the ice dragon's attention. I expected someone more impressive." "Who are you?" Amara demanded, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Dmitri Petrov." His smile was cruel. "Jinwoo killed my brother 3 years ago over a territory dispute. Shot him in the head, left him in the street like garbage. Now I'm going to take something precious from Jinwoo. See how he likes the pain." Understanding crashed through Amara like ice water. This wasn't random. This was revenge, personal and calculated. Jinwoo had been right to worry. Dmitri didn't play by rules. "Hurting me won't hurt him," Amara said, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "We barely know each other." Dmitri laughed, pulling out his phone. "That's not what my sources say. The ice dragon drives you home every night, waits outside your work, puts his best men on your protection detail when he can't be there himself." He snapped a photo of her tied up, bruised. "No, sweetheart, you matter, and that makes you valuable." He stood, tucking his phone away. "Jinwoo will get these photos in 10 minutes. Then we wait for him to come running. When he does, we'll be ready. I'll kill him slowly while you watch. Then I'll kill you. His empire will crumble, and I'll take everything he built." Dmitri walked away, barking orders in Russian. Amara's mind raced. Jin would come. She knew it with bone-deep certainty. But he'd be walking into a trap designed specifically for him. She had to warn him somehow, had to survive long enough to help. But tied up in a Russian gangster's warehouse, Amara had never felt more helpless. Jinwoo received the photos while meeting with his financial advisor in Buckhead. 3 images. Amara tied to a chair, bruised, terrified, but defiant. The message came with GPS coordinates and a simple taunt in Russian. "Come get your whore, ice dragon, I'm waiting." His blood turned to ice, then to fire. He'd known Dmitri would eventually make a move. The Russian had been circling like a shark for 2 years, looking for weakness. Jinwoo had protected his operation, his territory, his crew, but he'd failed to protect the one civilian who'd somehow become everything. "Gather everyone," Jinwoo told Time In, his voice devoid of emotion. The coldness that made him effective in his world settled over him like armor. "I want 20 men, full tactical. We move in 30 minutes. "Boss, it's obviously a trap," Taemin protested in Korean. "Dmitri wants you to come. He'll have 50 men waiting." "I know." Jinwoo checked his gun. A Sig Sauer P226, custom grip, chambered and ready. "I don't care." They hit the warehouse with surgical precision. Jinwoo had studied the coordinates, identified it as an old textile factory near the airport. Dmitri thought numbers would protect him. He was wrong. Jinwoo's crew moved like ghosts, suppressed weapons, coordinated entry points, thermal imaging showing exactly where the Russians were positioned. They took down perimeter guards silently, one after another, closing the net. When Jinwoo entered the main warehouse space, Amara was exactly where the photo showed, tied to a chair 15 feet from where Dmitri stood with a dozen armed men. The Russian's smug expression faltered when he realized Jinwoo hadn't come alone or unprepared. "You brought an army," Dmitri observed, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. "Smart, but not smart enough." "Let her go," Jinwoo stated, his voice carrying absolute authority. "This is between us, Dmitri. She's civilian, innocent." "No one who touches you stays innocent." Dmitri's gun cleared its holster, pressing against Amara's temple. She flinched but didn't cry out, her eyes finding Jinwoo's across the distance. "Your brother wasn't innocent either. He chose to challenge me, paid the price." "My brother ran guns through my territory without permission," Jinwoo replied coldly. "He knew the rules, broke them anyway. His death was business, not personal." "Everything is personal when it's family," Dmitri's voice cracked with rage. "You killed my blood, now I kill yours." The standoff hung on a knife's edge. 20 of Jinwoo's men against a dozen Russians, weapons trained, fingers on triggers. One wrong move and the warehouse would become a bloodbath. Then Amara did something unexpected. She drove her head backward, smashing into Dimitri's groin with desperate force. The Russian doubled over, his gun hand jerking away. Jinwoo moved instantly. 3 shots, center mass, Dimitri falling before he could recover. All hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Jinwoo's training took over. Move, shoot, cover, advance. He dropped 2 Russians charging his position, his team providing covering fire as he sprinted toward Amara. A bullet whizzed past his head. Another sparked off the metal container beside him. Jinwoo didn't slow. He reached Amara, cutting her restraints with his tactical knife, pulling her behind cover as rounds punched into the concrete where they'd just stood. "Keep your head down," Jinwoo ordered, his body shielding hers. "Don't look." But Amara was already looking, seeing him kill a man with cold efficiency, watching her rescuer transform into something lethal and terrifying. Jinwoo fired twice more, precise headshots, 2 Russians falling in spreading pools of blood. The firefight lasted 3 minutes. When silence finally descended, 12 Russians lay dead or dying. Jinwoo's team had taken no casualties. Professional execution against desperate amateurs. Jinwoo turned to Amara, checking her for injuries with shaking hands that betrayed his cold exterior. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm fine." But Amara's voice was hollow. She was staring at the bodies, at the blood, at the man who'd just killed a dozen people to save her. "Jin." "What?" "Who are you?" "We need to leave." Jinwoo tried to pull her toward the exit, but Amara wrenched away. "No, answer me. What are you?" Jinwoo met her eyes, seeing the horror and confusion there. This was the moment he'd dreaded, when she saw the truth unfiltered, when the protection and care dissolved into violence and death. "I'm exactly what you feared," he said quietly. "I kill people, Amara. Say it's what I do, what I've always done. Those men would have killed you, would have tortured you to hurt me, then disposed of you like trash." Jinwoo's jaw tightened. "I won't apologize for protecting you, but I understand if you can't look at me the same way now." Amara stared at him for a long moment. Jinwoo watched emotions play across her face. Shock, fear, revulsion, but also something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that in his world, violence wasn't a choice, but a currency. "Take me home," she whispered finally. "Just take me home." The drive back to Jinwoo's penthouse was silent. Amara had refused to go to her apartment. Too exposed, she'd said, too vulnerable. Jinwoo had offered his place without hesitation, though dread coiled in his stomach. She'd seen too much, understood too clearly what loving him meant. His doctor examined her in the penthouse's guest room, confirmed minor bruising, prescribed rest. When they were finally alone, Amara sat on the couch, staring at her hands. "Dimitri said you killed his brother," she said quietly. "Is that true?" "Yes." "Did he deserve it?" Jinwoo sat across from her, maintaining distance. "Alexei Petrov was running illegal arms through my distribution network, using my routes to move weapons that were ending up in the hands of teenagers. Gang violence spiked 20% in 3 months. Kids were dying." He met her eyes. "I gave him a chance to stop. He refused. So I made an example that would discourage others from making the same choice. You executed him." "I did. And tonight, those 12 men, some were there to kill you, some were there to kill me. All of them chose to be in that warehouse." Jinwoo's voice was carefully neutral. "I don't kill innocents, Amara, but I don't hesitate with threats either." Amara absorbed this, her nurse's mind processing information methodically. "How many people have you killed? Directly?" 14. Ordered? More than I can count." "And you feel nothing about it?" "I feel satisfaction that threats are eliminated, relief that my people are safe, necessity." Jinwoo paused, his expression softening slightly. "Tonight I felt terror, because someone I care about was in danger. That's new for me." "You care about me." It wasn't a question. "More than I've ever cared about anyone." Jinwoo's honesty was brutal, unfiltered. "Which makes you a liability. Dimitri wasn't wrong. You're my weakness now. Every enemy I have will see you as a target." "So what do we do?" The question hung in the air. Jinwoo wanted to tell her to run, to disappear back into her normal life, where she saved people instead of watching them die. But selfishly, desperately, he wanted her to stay. "That's your choice," he said finally. "I can protect you from a distance. Set you up somewhere safe, provide security, make sure no one ever touches you again. You'd never have to see me or my world again. And the other option. You stay. You accept what I am. The violence, the danger, the moral compromises. You become part of my world, with all the protection and peril that brings." Amara was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "I need time to process what I saw, to decide if I can live with loving someone who kills." She looked at him directly. "Because that's what's happening, isn't it? I'm falling in love with a killer." "Yes," Jinwoo admitted. "You are." Amara spent 3 days in Jinwoo's guest room, barely leaving except for meals. He gave her space, never pushing, always available but never intrusive. She used the time to think, to reconcile the man who'd protected her with the killer she'd watched, execute people without hesitation. On the morning of the 4th day, Jinwoo received a call that changed everything. "One of Dmitri's lieutenants survived," Damon reported. "Victor Sokolov. He's at Grady Memorial, your woman's hospital. Critical condition but stable." Jinwoo's mind calculated instantly. Victor was a loose end, a threat, someone who could identify his crew and testify if authorities got involved. Standard protocol was elimination, quiet, efficient, permanent. "Handle it," Jinwoo ordered. "Make it look like complications from his injuries." "Boss, Ms. Washington works there. If she finds out—" "She won't." Jinwoo ended the call, already compartmentalizing. This was business. Necessary. Amara didn't need to know. But when she emerged from the guest room 30 minutes later, dressed in borrowed clothes, her expression told him she'd heard. "There's a Russian in critical condition at Grady," Amara said, her voice carefully controlled. "Victor Sokolov. Gunshot wounds from a warehouse incident. You're going to kill him, aren't you?" Jinwoo considered lying, decided against it. "Yes. He's under medical care. He's helpless. He's a witness, a threat. And given the opportunity, he'd come after both of us." Jinwoo met her gaze steadily. "This is what I do, Amara. I eliminate threats before they become problems." "He's my patient." Amara's voice shook with suppressed emotion. "I've been treating him. I've been keeping him alive. And you're going to murder him in a hospital bed. I'm going to protect us both from future retaliation. By killing a helpless man." Amara's composure cracked. "Jin, I'm a nurse. I save lives. That's my purpose, my calling. And you're asking me to stand by while you take a life I helped preserve?" Jinwoo felt the chasm between them widening. "I'm not asking. I've already given the order." "Then cancel it." Amara stepped closer, her brown eyes fierce. "If you care about me at all, if there's any part of you that wants to be better than what you are, cancel the order." "Why?" Jinwoo demanded. "So Victor can recover and come back? So he can target you again when he's healed? You want me to leave a threat alive out of misplaced mercy?" "I want you to prove you're more than just a killer," Amara's voice broke. "I want to believe the man who protected me on the bus, who drove me home, who held me when I cried. I want to believe he's real, not just a mask hiding a monster." The words hit harder than any bullet. Jinwoo felt something crack in his chest, the careful armor he'd built, the cold efficiency that let him function in his world. Amara was asking him to choose between his nature and her conscience. "If I let him live, he becomes a liability," Jinwoo said quietly. "He can testify, identify my crew, bring law enforcement down on everything I've built. Then scare him, buy him off, make him disappear to another country. There are options besides murder." Amara's hand found his, her touch gentle despite her anger. "Please, Jin, show me you can choose mercy when it's hard." Jinwoo stared at their joined hands, her brown skin against his, the connection that had started everything. He'd killed 14 men personally, ordered dozens more eliminated. He'd built an empire on ruthlessness and calculated violence. Mercy was weakness in his world. Hesitation got you killed. But Amara was asking him to be weak, to hesitate, to risk everything for the chance that one Russian gangster wouldn't come back for revenge. He pulled out his phone and called time in. "Cancel the order on Victor," Jinwoo said in Korean. "Instead, arrange transport to Moscow. Give him $50,000 and a very clear message. If he ever returns to America or speaks about what happened, I'll kill everyone he loves before killing him. Make sure he understands." He ended the call and looked at Amara. "Done, he lives." Amara's exhale was shaky with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Jinwoo said grimly. "I just left a threat alive. If Victor comes back, if he talks, if he brings trouble, that's on both of us now." "He won't." Amara's conviction was absolute. Nobody returns to face the man who could have killed them, but chose mercy instead. You showed him you're more than a monster. That matters. Jinwoo wanted to believe her, wanted to think mercy was strength rather than weakness. But his training, his experience, every instinct screamed that he'd made a mistake. "Is this what it'll be like?" he asked quietly. "You asking me to spare my enemies? To compromise my security for your conscience? Is this what it'll be like?" Amara countered. "You killing anyone who threatens us? Living in constant violence and paranoia?" They stared at each other across an impossible divide. Jinwoo saw the truth clearly. He could have Amara or he could have his empire unchanged. Not both. She would push him toward mercy, toward restraint, toward becoming something softer than what he'd built himself to be. The question was whether he was willing to change. "I don't know if I can be what you need," Jinwoo admitted. "The man you met on the bus, he's real, but he's not all of me. There's darkness, Amara. Violence that's part of my nature, not just my circumstances. I've killed since I was 22. It doesn't haunt me." "That should terrify you." "It does terrify me." Amara moved closer, her hand cupping his face. "But what terrifies me more is the thought of walking away, of losing this chance with you, because I'm too afraid to navigate the difficult parts. The difficult parts include watching me hurt people, make choices you find morally repugnant, compromise your values by association." Jinwoo's voice was raw. "Is my protection worth that cost?" Amara was quiet for a long moment. Jinwoo watched her process, saw the war between her heart and her conscience playing across her features. Finally, she spoke. "I don't accept the violence. I'll never be okay with casual killing or unnecessary cruelty." Her voice was firm, establishing boundaries. "But I understand you operate in a world with different rules. So here's my condition. I stay, I love you. I build a life with you. But you have to try. Try to be better. Try to find solutions that don't always end in death. Try to use your power for protection rather than punishment when possible. And if I can't, then we end." Amara's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "Because I won't lose myself by loving you. I won't become someone who accepts unnecessary violence as normal. You have to meet me halfway, Jin. Has to be compromise, not capitulation." Jinwoo pulled her close, breathing in her scent, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. She was asking him to evolve, to be better than he'd ever tried to be. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I'll try," he promised. "I can't promise I'll always succeed, but I'll try." "That's enough," Amara whispered. "For now, that's enough." They stood together in the morning light, two people from impossible worlds making an impossible promise. Jinwoo didn't know if he could truly change, if mercy could coexist with his empire. But for Amara, he'd try. That had to be enough. 3 months later, Jinwoo Kang stood in a warehouse in South Atlanta, facing Miguel Ortega, head of the Latino family that controlled the Southern Territories. Between them, on a table, sat evidence of a problem: photos of human trafficking operations running through both their territories without permission. "We need to eliminate this," Miguel stated. "Whoever's moving people through our routes disrespects us both. Standard solution: we find them, we kill them, we send a message." Jinwoo studied the photos. Young women, scared, being transported like cargo. A year ago, he'd have agreed immediately. Killing the traffickers would be efficient, final, and send the right message about territorial control. But Amara's voice echoed in his mind. "Try to be better." "Alternative proposal," Jinwoo said carefully. "We find them, gather evidence, turn them over to the FBI's trafficking task force. Let the law handle it." Miguel's eyebrows rose. Since when does the Ice Dragon work with police? Since I realized there are threats that hurt our communities more than they threaten our business. Traffickers prey on the vulnerable, the people we claim to protect in our territories. Killing them is satisfying, but putting them in federal prison, dismantling their entire network, saving the victims, that's more effective. You've changed. Miguel's tone was assessing, not judgmental. The woman, she's making you soft. She's making me strategic. Jinwoo met his gaze steadily. Dead traffickers become martyrs, create power vacuums that fill with worse people. Imprisoned traffickers become warnings, and we build goodwill with the communities we operate in. Better for long-term business. Miguel considered this, then nodded slowly. Smart, I like it. We coordinate with the feds, anonymous tips, we look like heroes to the civilians while maintaining our territories. As the meeting concluded, Jinwoo felt something unexpected. Pride. He'd found a solution that satisfied his strategic goals while honoring Amara's values. It wasn't weakness, it was evolution. That evening, he found Amara at the community health clinic she'd convinced him to fund. 3 months ago, he'd dismissed it as throwing money away. Now, watching her treat patients who couldn't afford health care anywhere else, he understood it was an investment in legitimacy and goodwill. "How was your day?" Amara asked, finishing with an elderly patient before joining him in the hallway. "Productive. Dealt with a trafficking operation without killing anyone." Jinwoo said it casually, but watched for her reaction. Amara's smile was radiant. "Tell me everything." As they drove back to the penthouse, Jinwoo explained the plan. The coordination with federal authorities, the evidence gathering, the strategic thinking that made Mercy profitable. Amara listened, asking questions, offering insights from her medical work about how to identify trafficking victims. "You're really doing it," she said softly, as they entered their home, becoming someone who builds instead of just destroys. "I'm trying," Jinwoo corrected. "There's still violence when necessary. I'm not a saint, Amara. Had a crew member stealing from the distribution network last week. I broke both his hands as warning to others. But you didn't kill him." "No, I didn't." Jinwoo pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You're making me better. Sometimes I resent it. The restraint, the calculation, the times I want to eliminate a problem permanently, but choose your way instead. But mostly, I'm grateful." Amara's fingers traced the dragon tattoo on his neck, the design that had fascinated her since that first bus encounter. "I'm not trying to change your nature, just redirect it. You're protective, powerful, strategic. Those traits don't have to equal violence. They do in my world. Then we change your world." Amara looked up at him, her brown eyes serious. "You have resources, influence, respect. Use them to build something legitimate. Not overnight, not completely, but gradually. Transition from criminal empire to business empire." Jinwoo had been considering this for weeks, running numbers with his financial advisors, identifying which operations could be legitimized and which needed to remain in shadows. It was possible, difficult, risky, requiring years of careful maneuvering, but possible. "Would you stand beside me through that transition?" he asked. "Years of straddling two worlds, legitimate and criminal, building something new." "As your partner," Amara clarified. "Not as your protected civilian, but as your actual equal partner." Jinwoo pulled back slightly, reaching into his pocket. He'd been carrying the ring for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Now felt right. "As my wife," he corrected, opening the small box. "As my partner in everything. As the person who makes me want to be better than I am." The ring was elegant, a diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light. Amara's breath caught, tears gathering in her eyes. "You're proposing?" "I'm asking you to build a life with me, a complicated, difficult, sometimes morally ambiguous life, but one where we're together." Jinwoo's voice was steady despite the fear churning in his chest. "I can't promise to be perfect. I'll still make choices you disagree with, but I promise to try to be worthy of you, every single day." Amara's hands trembled as she reached for the ring, then pulled back. "I need you to understand what you're asking. I'm a black woman who will be married to a Korean mafia boss. I'll face racism, judgment, danger. People will question my morals, my judgment, my choices. Am I worth that complexity to you? You're worth everything, Jinwoo stated without hesitation. You're the only person who's ever made me want to be better, who's looked at my darkness and chosen to stay, who's challenged me to evolve instead of accepting what I am. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, people will judge, but Amara, you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Marrying you would be the honor of my life. Tears spilled down Amara's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. I'll build this complicated, messy, beautiful life with you. Jinwoo slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her, deep, passionate, sealing the promise. When they broke apart, both smiling through tears, the future felt both terrifying and exhilarating. My mother is going to have so many questions, Amara laughed. I'll answer all of them, Jinwoo promised, respectfully, honestly, and with the understanding that I'll spend my entire life proving I deserve you. You already do, Amara said softly. You already do. 6 months later, the Kang Family Foundation officially opened, a non-profit funding healthcare, education, and community protection initiatives throughout Atlanta. Jinwoo still maintained his underground operations, but they'd shifted focus toward genuine protection rather than exploitation. The violence hadn't disappeared, but it had become more selective, more strategic, more purposeful. Amara worked as the foundation's medical director, overseeing clinic expansions throughout underserved neighborhoods. She still treated patients daily, refusing to let her new position distance her from the work she loved. They'd gotten married in a small ceremony, her family wary but warming to Jinwoo's obvious devotion, his crew respectful of the woman who'd transformed their boss. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still arguments about his methods, still nights when Amara struggled with the moral compromises of loving him, still moments when Jinwoo resented the restraint she demanded. But they were building something new, together. The night of the Foundation's opening gala, Jinwoo found Amara on the balcony of their penthouse, staring at the Atlanta skyline. Regrets? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Never. Amara leaned back against him. We're making a difference, Jin. Real, tangible difference. That clinic has treated 500 patients this month. 500 people who had nowhere else to go. Because you pushed me to be better. Because you chose to be better. Amara turned in his arms, her smile radiant. You did the work, made the hard choices, evolved when it would have been easier to stay what you were. I'm proud of you. The words settled in Jinwoo's chest, warm and precious. Pride had always come from respect through fear, from territory won and enemies defeated. Pride from someone he loved, someone who knew his darkness and celebrated his light. That was new. That was better. I love you, he said simply. I love you too, Amara kissed him softly. My dangerous, complicated, surprisingly gentle criminal husband. Former criminal, Jinwoo corrected with a slight smile. Mostly. Mostly, Amara agreed, laughing. They stood together under Atlanta's stars, two people from impossible worlds who'd built something possible. She grabbed his hand by accident on a crowded bus. He'd chosen to hold on and everything had changed. Neither would ever let go. The community health clinic opened its third location in southwest Atlanta on a warm spring morning. Amara stood beside Jinwoo, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly, 6 months pregnant with their first child. Kang Family Foundation read the sign above the entrance, now recognized throughout Atlanta for its healthcare and community initiatives. Jinwoo had fully legitimized his operations, using his underground connections to fight trafficking, protect vulnerable communities, and fund positive change. The violence hadn't disappeared completely. Jinwoo still maintained certain relationships, still made hard choices when threats emerged. But Amara had learned to accept the complicated man she'd married, not perfect, not entirely clean, but genuinely committed to being better. You did this, she said, watching families stream through the clinic's doors for free healthcare. We did this, Jinwoo corrected, his hand covering hers on her stomach. Your vision, my resources, our shared purpose. Their daughter kicked, and both laughed. They decided to name her Hope, a reminder of what they'd built from an accidental encounter. Jinwoo's crew had been surprised but supportive. Amara's family had gradually accepted the complicated man who so obviously adored their daughter. "Mrs. Kang," a nurse called from the entrance. "We're ready for the ribbon cutting." Mrs. Kang. Amara smiled every time she heard it. She'd kept Washington professionally, but wore Jinwoo's name proudly in their personal life. They walked to the entrance together, Jinwoo's hand steady on her back. As cameras flashed and reporters asked questions, Amara thought about that night on the bus, the accidental touch that had changed everything. She'd grabbed his hand searching for balance. He'd held on and given her the world. "Ready," Jinwoo murmured. Amara smiled, lifting the ceremonial scissors. "Always." Together they cut the ribbon, stepping forward into their future, built on protection, transformation, and love that conquered every difference.